Welcome. All right, guys, I'm going to show you something that may make you cross-eyed, but just consider what I did for a couple weeks because this certainly did it. So all of that are a number of categories that actually I will show in a more palatable form here in just a second. And if I could get that to respond a little bit better. Every time I slide it up, let's see. There we go. Let's get it on the right spot. Okay. So we went through our all-time rankings videos last week. We posted those. Check them out, folks. We went per conference. And of course, I can never do anything right because I didn't consider this and I didn't consider that. And what about this, Mark? And what about that? That's fine. Most of you are appreciative, it seems. So this is what we did. So on down the line, and again, I'll make this a little more palatable, except for there's a couple items on the spreadsheet that I didn't get into the video exactly, or yes, I did. So what counts here is this is all time. So your championship in 1901 counts just as much as your championship in 2023, and so forth and so on. The wins and the so forth, the wins against Albion and Carlisle and so forth. So it all counts the same. I do put it into context in terms of winning percentage more recently, and that's what seemed to trigger a lot of people, at least in this Big Ten discussion, because it pretty much involves two programs. And also you can't do anything about, so we're ranking all-time programs here within the current conference. So of course, Nebraska had their heyday in another conference. Penn State was an independent for much of its heyday, and so forth and so on. So you can never nail this thing perfectly. So over on the left side there, you see winning percentage. And where I think I'll go from here is there we go. So drag that a little clearer. Yeah, I'm sliding right by it. Okay, why is that not clear? It's not clear for some reason. Anyway, my tab is not clicking into the internet as well as this is. All right, so this is the all-time winning percentage. And I think that 12 games that we talked about the last couple of weeks with Ohio State in 2010, the 12 vacated nudges them just slightly below Michigan, and the 12 games would edge them past Michigan. So, of course, I did the right thing, and I gave Michigan the rightful place at number one, even though the winning percentages are not technically identical. Of course, we've got decimal points past 3 digits, but 734 rounded off. And so it's a virtual tie. And USC's coming into the league. Again, this is the show for all the people that were like, why would USC? They didn't do this against the Big Ten. It's just to show, okay, what kind of programs are being entered into the Big Ten. But Nebraska, Penn State, those are two curious programs because they did a full-on rush from like the 60s on to get themselves near or into the elite of college football. But those are the all-time winning percentages, guys. So any thoughts there?
I mean, that's to be expected. So I have no opinion on fact, and I will rest.
Ohio State over the last 20 years has reeled in Michigan because it was never really that close before. And so that was good. And it's beyond just them beating Michigan. I think Ohio State's obviously had one double-digit win season after another, whereas Michigan has kind of meandered through the forest here for 20 years, 25 years probably. Washington to be that high on the list is a little surprising, but they have good football there and have. Nebraska would have been a lot higher had the last 25 years not happened. And, Penn State's probably about where you'd think they are. They dominate everybody but Ohio State and Michigan. So
And
that's
they would be
that's
third
about
on
all.
this list without the Paterno vacations, right?
Yes,
Perhaps.
you would think. Yeah, that covers a couple seasons. Now, and then, of course, we have the second tier, second divisions. Boy, it's bunched up between about 55 and 60%.
Wisconsin
Oregon,
ahead
you
of
have to think,
Iowa
is
is
making a mad
surprising to
rush.
me.
That they're
Wisconsin
that
ahead of
low?
well, it's just that Wisconsin is ahead of Iowa, given Wisconsin has been, you'd think of them since like 1993 and on,
Yeah.
whereas
Yeah.
Iowa has been around for forever. And we know Minnesota won like national championships back in like the 50s or whatever. So they're still coasting on that. But yeah, I'm surprised that Iowa is lower than Wisconsin. Michigan State makes sense.
And then the drags. This Indiana winning percentage is the worst in the country all time in the Power Five. Battling with Wake Forest. And as I remind people, as you guys will know, this is tough to achieve under 50% because obviously you're playing FCS and group of 5 teams. So there are only about 6 or 7 schools in the country under a 500 winning percentage because you've got 3 or 4 gimme wins typically every year. The collective of the power conferences win 85+% against the group of 5 and like 95% plus against the FCS. So here we go, guys. This will make the contingent feel even better here. This is the college football playoff era winning percentage right there.
So is Ohio State second or third all time? Like in nationally, do you know in this
Number
category?
2. Bama's at 119 and whatever that would be, 120 and 14 or something. They're a shade above Ohio State. Ohio State still has 7 less losses than Georgia during that time, and Clemson's at 119 and 20. So yes, Ohio State's pretty firm number 2.
That makes sense.
It'll be interesting to watch Washington and Penn State kind of jockey for position, being so close. I expect Penn State to move ahead of them over the next couple of years. We'll see. See what old Jed Fish can do there at Washington.
And Wisconsin's been so marginal for the last few seasons. I thought it was pretty impressive that they held up at 90 and 38 during the CFP era.
I was thinking about Wisconsin today in terms of, can they survive by bringing in a new quarterback every year? Like they need to. They've always been at their best when they're building from within, and even the Russell Wilson year, they brought him in and they lost to Ohio State, a bad Ohio State team. But normally it's like this guy is the 5th-year starter who is now entering his 3rd year as a starter, whereas now they're just cycling through a new quarterback every year, and it's a guy that has been up and down at his previous stop. So you can't. You're hoping that the ups and downs you're hitting on the up when they get to Wisconsin, and I don't think that's not Luke Fickell's fault. That's just the way the game is right now. But I'm sure they didn't anticipate having to go with a new guy every year, and maybe if they can get 2021 Tyler Van Dyke or 2022 whatever it was, maybe they'll have something. But I don't think you can consistently hope like that.
Not to discount Iowa, they're basically grouped up with everybody else. They're just a tick under Wisconsin, who was number 3. They just happen to be on the next page. So they've been strong.
All right, Northwestern.
And
better than the alternative, I guess.
Yes, better than these. Better than, I guess we don't have, there we go. When Nebraska is being outdistanced for a decade by Northwestern by a good measure,
Wow.
that's pretty bad.
My word.
And Nebraska has a ways to go just to get back to 500. That's boy. And it's only been what 10 years of the CFP era.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it. So now we track it back to the 21st century. This would be 2001. And again, pretty dominant position there.
Pete Carroll keeping USC afloat there.
Yep.
And Rich Rod trying to sink Michigan, of course. Did a decent job.
Let's see the next tier. Iowa playing pretty well. They're pretty much of a 2-1. There's my backing, my confirmation every time I call them an 8-4 program, and some people don't like that, but that's pretty much 8-4.
Yeah.
Look at Indiana winning 36% of its games, even with 3 gimmies typically each year.
Some years they're not all gimmies.
No.
No.
Not against Akron last year. It wasn't.
They got to stop scheduling the MAC. I've been saying it for years.
Did they lose to Akron?
They Akron missed a field goal at the gun that would have won the game. Indiana beat him, by 2. Like a makeable field goal. And there we go, 1970, which, I got a little riled up the other day because, of course, this was me manipulating the numbers. This was me just taking this cherry picking just 54 seasons, just a small little slice just to put Ohio State on top. So wouldn't have anything to do with maybe just kind of a general round number of where we are. Many of us in terms of our age, I think there's like 75% watching this channel that are pretty much between like 40 and 60, 65. So may have something to do with that. May have something to do with a certain race of athlete that shows up 70% on NFL rosters that largely was not participating in certain parts of the country and fully until around 1970. Could also make that claim.
Also, for Michigan fans, don't you have to go back like 102 years before they would have the best record in this stretch? So how far back do we need to go? Like you basically have to go back all time for them to have the best record. So, and you've done that. So I think it's okay to slice things up and see here from where to where. But boy, Nebraska, they did a lot of winning. I remember, I guess it would have been like 30 years ago, thinking like 25, 30 years ago, like nobody's ever going to stop Nebraska. They're just a machine that you can't stop them. They roll through everybody. And then when Arizona State beat them in 1996 and the start of the year and shut them out or whatever, and it was like, I didn't know that was possible. At that, I was in college, and that's when I finally realized all things are possible.
I was right there with you watching it, thinking this can't be. Yeah, they were incredible. And if you take that slice out, 1970 to 2000, Ohio State, of course, in all these that we are showing is the clear number 1. But if you take that slice and reverse it, well, they dropped to number 2, and Nebraska has that number 1 spot from 70 to 2000. They do.
God, if we could all just go back, I'd go back to 1986, 87 and start over. Sure, why not?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. UCLA's been a curious program. They've had their hot spots. Terry Donahue, Dick Vermeil.
They should be able to do something again. I think a lot of it is about caring. I don't care that fans don't care, but the people in the program have to care, and the boosters have to care. And until that happens, I don't think anybody else will. But it's like you should be able to do well there. I know you don't play on campus, but you're not the only program that doesn't play on campus, and you have resources there. You should be able to do better. like 7-5, 8-4. In the Big Ten, shouldn't they be able to do the 8-4, 9-3, like eventually?
You would think. What are your overall impressions of just Michigan State's program? Whether that's today, 10 years ago, it's like they hit a hot coach. Of course, Mark D'Antonio turned them into something that they haven't been for generations. But the rest of it with Michigan State, sometimes I think they're big time, and have throughout my life looked at Michigan State football like, okay, they're one of the upper crust, or they can be, but they just get lost for 10 and 15 years at a time.
It's not a serious enterprise. It's just not a serious enterprise. And Mark D'Antonio is one of the most serious people I've ever met in my entire life. I mean, he's just such a no-nonsense, no bullshit person. And he surrounded himself with some pretty good coaches, and they recruited Ohio like hell and got a lot of good players that Ohio State didn't take out of Ohio, and got, good players from other places. And they had people for his, however long he was there, 10 years, 12, 13 years, whatever it was. They operated at as close to full efficiency as Michigan State is ever going to operate at. I've never seen it operate at that efficiency in my entire lifetime. I know in the late 60s, they in Notre Dame were like number one, number two for like 2 seasons, 67 and 66, something like that. And they had Bubba Smith and, whatever. But otherwise, it's just not a serious enterprise. And, they have good support. If you go there and the 2 teams that are playing that day are pretty good, the stadium's rocking and it's pretty exciting. They got a huge enrollment, 40,000 students, I think. I mean, it's a big school. And it's like a sleeping giant. It could be great, but it operates in the shadow of the University of Michigan. And unless Michigan's down, it's hard for Michigan State to be up. I mean, it just is. And Michigan State took full advantage of the 2000s and the 2010s when Michigan was terrible. That 10-year segment where Michigan, other than 2016, was pretty good, was not very good. So it's just not a serious football program at the level of Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. It just isn't. When you have the right people there, it can be, and the right climate, and the right situation. But, some of these people that they've run through there, like Mel Tucker, John L. Smith, and some of these other clowns, it's just not a serious enterprise. So I guess the jury will be out on Jonathan Smith. We'll see how he does. But I liked him in Oregon State. And we'll see if he's able to catch lightning in a bottle at Michigan State. Got to surround yourself with great assistant coaches, and got to recruit. And I got to tell you, I've never been to a basketball game at Michigan State in January or February where I felt like, boy, I'd really like to spend a lot of months here. Never come away from that experience ever, not one time saying that. So East Lansing. So that's just me, though.
Campus is beautiful in the fall, but we're always there when it's just started to get really, really cold, and walking back to the car in snow and ice. But, Nick Saban was 3 games over 500 over his first 4 years at Michigan State. Finally had a good season, and then got the heck out of Dodge as quickly as, when he was finally able to. With Tucker, he cashed in on the 1 year, and I like what Mark D'Antonio did there is incredibly rare. I think Michigan State needs a lifer, which D'Antonio was, which George Perlis was. And then that lifer needs to obviously be a very, very good coach. And you look at what they did in 13, 14, and 15, where they lost 2 Big Ten games over a 3-year span. And then as Michigan rose back up in 15, Michigan State started to, dwindle back down. They had 2 10-win seasons over the Jim Harbaugh era, but Michigan State did. But like, it's 10 wins, then it's 7 wins, and then there's 4 wins. So like the ups and downs. What Mark D'Antonio did there was pretty incredible to have. I think it was 6 10-win seasons. I'm guessing they probably, as I'm just scrolling through their all-time record, I see like 2 10-win seasons before D'Antonio ever arrived in the history of Michigan State. Now they played 9 or 10 game seasons back, for a very long time. But what he did there, he's the best of all time that did it at Michigan State, at least in terms of the Nick Saban is the best of all time, but he wasn't at Michigan State. He was just I still wonder if that punt doesn't hit Nate Clement's leg and Michigan State doesn't beat Ohio State in 98. And does this is Nick Saban long for Michigan State? Because again, he was a 500 coach for 4 years at Michigan State, and that's not something they wanted to keep doing when George Perlis had taken them to Rose Bowls and things like that. But sleeping giant, they should be. I mean, everybody in the Big Ten honestly should be a sleeping giant, but like Steve said, they have to be serious about it. And if you're getting all of this cash and you're not serious about it, I don't really have any sympathy if you're struggling.
Yep, I agree.
So AP poll points, folks, the way this works is you've got the AP distributes points based on the final ranking, which goes back to 1936, of course. If you finish number 1, you get 25 points. Number 2, 24 points on down the line. Certainly far from a perfect system, but do I think it's valid? Yeah, if you finish number 5 in the country, you're probably about the number 5 team in the country. You can make an argument for number 3 or number 7, but yeah, so this is meaningful. There's no question. And Ohio State's got about 100-point lead on Michigan.
Yeah, it's about what you'd expect. Ohio State's been consistently good from 1936 on, and that's the AP poll era, almost 90 years now of data. So, yeah, I think to me that all reconciles with me. That UCLA is 6th on that list is pretty good. But yeah, the top 5 all make sense.
And on down the line, then we've got so I figured that was a bit difficult to digest for people. Okay, poll points. Okay, they've got 1,000, they've got 850. Okay, fine, I get it. But if you look at how many times these schools have been ranked in the final poll, and then ranked in the top 10, and then ranked in the top 5, so that's what those 3 numbers are, separated by the dashes. Ranked, top 10, top 5. Ohio State with the more elite teams, and Michigan beats them by 1 selection in the final top 25 or top 20 at various times.
Yeah, just neck and neck with each other in this modern era, or 90 years, I guess, pre-modern and modern era. 30 top 5 teams, that is impressive out of 90 years. That's our 89 seasons. I guess it would be 88 seasons, because if the first one was in 36, then the 90th one would be in 2025. So we have 2 years left, 88 years. That's a pretty good ratio. And to be in the top 10 half the time, wow. That's really good.
I think it's interesting
to me.
Yeah, it's also interesting to look at the difference between Ohio State and Nebraska and just see that stretch of that bad stretch for Nebraska being illustrated in each of these numbers. Whereas you would think that for the longest time they would have been at the top, and it's they've had a bad 20 years, and you see like 15 years not ranked where Ohio State was ranked, 13 years not in the top 10 when Ohio State was there, and so on. But again, as I've said on this show and others, 10 wins for Nebraska this year. Book it, bank it, playoff bound.
Book it.
Despite, yeah, I'm going all in. And then now just go ahead and I've also just guaranteed Colorado will beat them. So fantastic job by me.
Then you go through, and obviously we could highlight the ups and downs of these other programs, but this is crazy to me. And it's
Undefeated
similar.
Rutgers.
Exactly. It's similar at Kansas, or not Kansas. I'm sorry. It's similar at Iowa State, Vanderbilt, like 3 times ranked in the history of the program and never reaching the top 10, playing football for 110 or 15 or 20 years. And obviously this goes back to 36.
What did Rutgers finish in 2006?
Yeah, they finished like 12
Mhm.
or 13. I think that's their high water mark. But North Carolina State, I think of North Carolina State, okay, they go 8-4, 7-5 most seasons, go to okay bowl game, never finished in the top 10. You got your all-time bowl wins. And USC, you got to throw some respect out there for their Rose Bowl record all time. It's crazy good. I believe 25-9.
I would have thought Phillip Rivers one of those years in 2002 or 3 when 2003 when they were dealing with Ohio State, but yeah, just looking, they were ranked but didn't stay there.
There you get your major bowl wins, and once you shoot, Michigan picked up 2 this past season and still only at 13 compared to the other ones there.
You can't win major bowls unless you're in major bowls. It's kind of a rule.
It seems to work that way.
Did the Pac-12 or the Pac-8 or whatever it was back in the day have rules about only one team being able to make a bowl game back then, like the Big Ten did or whatever?
No. As far as I know, or at least that was stripped away much sooner. Because that's there's all sorts of caveats and conditions and context that need to be placed to these.
My big book of college football can tell me the answer to that.
Get on that, Steve. All right, Michigan's won the most Big Ten titles. This is all conference titles, and then, of course, folks that commented sometimes people comment before they watch the entire video, and then they're all over. Well, you're giving Nebraska these big. Okay, we then went to the Big Ten championship, so those are conference championships, and not anything too surprising there. And we got our Big Ten membership just to line up where everybody joined. And this conference was pretty well in place by 1912, other than Michigan State jumping in 53. And then I went to percentage of Big Ten titles. And that drops off a cliff, obviously, after those 2.
It is interesting to see Penn State up there ahead of, considering they've been in league, 30 years now or whatever, and able to make a dent like that. It's pretty good.
I think most of us would have guessed more out of Penn State. Like, they've been really good and consistently winning their 9 games, but especially winning the league.
Especially how much easier it was to win a Big Ten championship when you could share it with 2 or 3 other teams, like Jim Tressel has sharing some with Penn State in there as well, as I believe.
Yep. 05 and 08.
Lost both times to Penn State that year.
Yes,
years.
and shared. Yeah.
Oof.
Indiana squeaked out 2.
Poor Iowa.
11 championships. Let's see. They won their last they tied Michigan in 04. And we
But
got our
I do think,
national.
yeah, and we know Northwestern would have 2 fewer if they had played Ohio State in 95 or 96. I think that's
Yeah.
understood.
That's even understood by can't think of
That's
the son's name, but I had a conversation with Johnny Musso, is a famous running back at Alabama, an all-timer, like 60s, 70s. His son, of course, you guys will come up with his name, that played for Northwestern, the running back.
Brian.
Anyways, yeah, Ryan Musso. He flat out told me, we used to watch Ohio State on tape, depending on who we were playing that week. We didn't want to play them. So, yeah.
The answer seems to be on that it was sporadic, that occasionally a Pac-8 team would play in another bowl game like once in the 60s. But USC's first non-Rose Bowl was the Liberty Bowl in 1975 season when UCLA played in the Rose Bowl. And then the following year, UCLA played in its first non-Rose Bowl, which was the Liberty Bowl after the 76 season. So there is some Oregon and Oregon State playing in like one bowl game in the 60s that was not a Rose Bowl. Maybe they got invited to fill a spot or something, or they needed a team and they just went. But yeah, it's very similar to what the Big Ten had, that you couldn't go anywhere else till like 74, 75, something like that.
So when it comes to the national championships, I have not vetted this completely out. So this is, of course, I'm going to go to Winsipedia and just kind of run through those and throw them up there. But I am not satisfied with the national championship totals.
No,
because I think that there are several teams, several seasons. They're all over the place. We've done a series here we've made it all the way back to 1970, where we vetted out the entire season and said, you know what? 1983, yes. Did Miami clearly have the number one team in the country? No. Auburn went 11-1 with a tougher schedule. You know what? Texas beat Auburn. They went 11-1 as well. They lost by 1 point in a bowl game. A bowl game's not a playoff game, even though people like to treat it as such. So in my system, they're all three the national champion. And so I expand this out, and I have yet to really apply that process
Ohio
here.
State, my count, has 6. They also claim like 61 and 70. 61, they didn't get to play in the Rose Bowl. 70, they lost the Rose Bowl. It was like it was presented before the Rose Bowl. They lost to Jim Plunkett and Stanford, I think, in the Rose Bowl at the end of the 70 season. So those two get debunked, right away. I counted as 6. I have no idea what they think the other one is, but the 6 that I count are 1942, 1954, 1957, 1968, then nothing until 2002, and then 2014. Those are the 6 that are, considered, my word is consensus, national champions in a season. And there were other champions potentially in 42, 54, 57. There was no other champion in 68. I think they pretty much swept the whole shebang in 68, but it was disputed in some of those other seasons.
Yeah. So I stripped the 1970 season as well. But what about 1996?
I don't know who would call them a champion in 96. They could lay a claim to it. They and Florida both ended up with 1 loss. Florida avenged its loss. What was it, to Florida State previously, and beat them in the Sugar Bowl to win the, whatever it was at that time, Bowl Alliance National Championship game. And everybody went Florida 1 and Ohio State 2. I don't know anybody that Ohio State won. They may have gotten some first place votes in the AP poll. I don't know, but they beat who was the number 2 team? I think Arizona State. It was 2 versus 4, I think, in that Rose Bowl, and they beat the number 2 team, who was undefeated, I believe. Arizona State would have won it had they beaten Ohio State. So 98, I thought they kind of got short shrift a little bit. I thought in 98 people will say, oh, they had the worst loss losing to a crappy Michigan State team at home. But man, if you watched them play, they were pretty good. So
I would also say, Steve, actually, Florida State, that obviously got its shot playing in the championship game, they lost to a 6-5 NC State team. Ohio State lost to a 6-5 Michigan State team. The only difference is Florida State lost by 17 points.
yeah. That is crazy when you think about it. It's all apples to oranges comparisons, and the good thing now is they're going to play it out on the field. The top 12 will get out there on the field and play it out starting this year. So I think we've got a lot to look forward to, provided they don't, kill the model any more than they already have. I mean, for everything they've done to try and kill it, it will not die. So the ratings for a lot of this stuff are as high now as they've ever been. So, it continues to thrive. I don't know. The industry's got some issues, but we've talked about it quite a bit on the shows.
Yeah. So, for example, we reviewed all of Alabama's national championships because they take all sorts of grief, including from me before I looked at them. 18 national championships. What ended up happening was I took away 2, but I added 2. And so I landed on 18 again. But I just had 4 differences of opinion based on being very regimented with record, resume, qualifications. So my lineup of national championships expands immensely because I don't take many away, but I add a lot of championships because I just think that Penn State in 1994 should be able to claim a national championship.
No doubt. So dominant. Yeah.
They just, what else were they supposed to do? You have 2 major conference teams that are loaded, that are tremendous, play tough schedules. They go to separate locations and play a bowl game. What are you going to do there? We know what the deal with the NFL draft is, but some Ohio State fans might be surprised here. USC's got a comfortable lead of 40-ish. So Ohio State no longer number 1 in the Big Ten.
Interesting. Ohio State's obviously got more first-round picks than anybody after Marvin Harrison this year. And that's probably going to continue to be the case for a while.
And I think of Rutgers throughout history. I understand that they've been at the bottom, but in comparison to Indiana, to be just produce that few of NFL players, that somewhat surprised me.
Given Rutgers, the history, the first college football team ever, they're averaging about a half a player drafted every year at this rate. Is that about right?
Yeah, something like that. When Northwestern has produced 3 times as many NFL players as Rutgers, that's pretty significant. Then we got as Steve alludes to, Ohio State still has the lead. First round selections, and that's a pretty good gap with the first 2 over everyone else. And Michigan State jumps in there with 36. They've got more than Nebraska does. If I can get that to line up. And Wisconsin.
Well, a lot of the Nebraska stuff is, interior guys, the line of scrimmage guys, or you're not drafting option quarterbacks in the first round. So some of their top guys weren't necessarily that, or they were walk-ons who just fit the program perfectly. And with that option stuff, that's exactly what it's about. It's about doing your job really, really well, and that job doesn't necessarily translate to the NFL.
Well, I appreciate you guys being here and running through these stats with me. I will just let the rest of it roll, but I'll make this statement that I gained a little bit more respect for the writers that vote on these individual awards, because my thought was, okay, we got objective statistics and probably should just go with that. We shouldn't go with all Americans and major award winners and Heisman because that's subjective. However, in every conference, it's the same way. Those awards line up almost perfectly with the tiers of the team's accomplishments. It's almost in every conference. So I have to say, over the course of close to 100 years with some of these awards or whatever they've been, 50 years, that's pretty credible.
These are professionals, Mark. Professional media. Let's show some respect.
That's right. I rarely do, but except for, of course, our contingent here. But major award winners. I even went with. Let's back it up there. I even went with, all the Biletnikoff, the Mackey, the Doak Walker, and on down the line, every position, and that again reflects well on Ohio State. And on down the line, might be a little surprising. USC only has 9 when Ohio State's got 30 major award winners.
That's East Coast bias. That's what that is.
It is, and I certainly got tagged a few times, or a few dozen plus, for when I threw it all together. And I won't go through the whole point system here. I've explained this elsewhere, folks. There are your final point system. I'm not saying that this is the perfect system. It's just one man's system. It could be tweaked, altered. Let's not go crazy.